What's up, friends? Today we are here with the Onewheel build again, and we're starting in kind of a weird position. I don't normally start videos looking at this stuff, but the way I'm recording this is like partway through a different video. I'm also recording this video so I can finish things at the same time. Today we are going to be putting lights into the Onewheel build, and I'm following a guide made by Mario Contino. You can check it out in the description, but this will be my video version of it. And to do this, we need a couple of things. First, we need light strip, of course. I'll link the one that I use in the description. This is a super high density, I believe it's 141 LEDs per meter, something like that, of the, I think it's 2812 or 2821 50/50 LEDs, and these should be super bright. I got the bright white version, so this is an RGBW strip. You power it using a 3-pin. We're going to take this off and change it to the MR30 so it matches the MR30 that I put on the harness over here that goes onto the cable to the front of the VESC board. In addition, we're going to need an Arduino Nano, and for this, I've got a 3-pack of these Elegoo ones because they're cheap. You basically just need an Arduino Nano. Pretty easy, you can use whatever one you want, but we got that. And then we also need a buck converter that's able to convert the 75 volts of the battery down to the 5 volts for the Arduino. So we got one from Mouser, and this will be linked in the description as well. It is this little tiny brick, and it has pins that are normally meant to be used on a breadboard style or a Perfboard style install, but we're just going to be soldering directly to them. That should be no problem. And this will convert our voltage down so that the Arduino can use it and power the LEDs. So this is going to be a little bit of a finicky install. I already can tell it's going to require some weird custom bits, and should be interesting. Let's get going. Alright, so I'm well aware of how messy my desk is right now, but like I said, I'm trying to record multiple videos at the same time, and I'm partway through the ESC box build and partway through the battery build. Actually, I finished the battery build, but I'm partway through the ESC box build, and I wanted to be able to install the lights in the rear before I sort of permanently close it up. So you can hear the power supply in the background, and that's going to be part of what this first step is. So you kind of would think that you would want to measure out the lights and cut them and all that first, but we're actually going to start with the Arduino, and we're going to solder the UART connector up to it as well as the power connector, and we're going to power it off my power supply and then connect the lights up and make sure the light strip works properly. And then once we plug it into the board, if we have any issues, we'll know that outside of the board it worked already. So we're going to start with the Nano, and we're just going to pull one of these out since it's a 3-pack. Wow, these are smaller than I thought. I've actually not worked with an Arduino Nano before. I've used some larger ones, but never a Nano. So we have a couple things that we need to solder on here, and one of those is the power. So there's several pins that we're going to be interfacing with. Going to be interfacing with the TX RX. Those are going to go to the UART on the VESC. We are also going to be interfacing with the 5-volt and ground, which are right here. Here, I'll get this a lot closer actually. All right, so we're going to be interfacing with a number of pins. First, TX and RX, these are going to go to the VESC. Then 5 volt and ground ground being there, 5 volt being there. And we're also going to interface with D10 and D11. These are digital out pins, and these are what are going to control the LED strip functions. Now, the code for this, I will put a link in the description and sort of go through how we set that up. But the code for this is not something that I wrote, it's something that I'm pulling that's already made. So we'll get to that, but for starters, we're going to solder on these pins and crimp a connector to connect to the little Fokker. All right, so I went ahead and grabbed a cable from my set of extra parts. This is just an extra ESC cable. This is actually a 6-pin JST 2.0. Technically, the UART port on this little Fokker is a 7-pin, but we don't need to use all 7 pins. So we're actually just going to de-pin it even more, because we only need 4 cables out of here. We need 5.5 volt, ground, TX, and RX. And we can just place this into the 7-pin port. And since we're going to be using a dab of hot glue anyway, having both of the retaining clips doesn't really make that much of a difference. So we're going to de-pin this, and I'll repin it, and I'll put on screen what the pins are. All right, so we got 4 pins on here, and I'll put the wiring diagram on screen over here for the little Fokker. And we've got red 5 volt, black ground, and then we've got TX and RX there. Now, it's important to remember on the little Fokker, it is receiving and sending information through these TX and RX pins, which means on the Arduino, you're going to solder them the opposite of how they are on the little Fokker. That is fine as long as you remember it. The other side of these will just be soldered straight into the Arduino. So that's what we're going to do now. I forgot there's actually one more thing that we need here, which is the 3.3 volt pin on the UART port, which is between the 5 volt and ground. So we're just going to go ahead and stick that in there. And this 3.3 volt pin is what will go to the buck converter on the enable pin. So a quick look into what I'm actually doing here. Tiny little tap of flux pen on the spots we're soldering to. The tips of these are pre-tinned. Cut them to just the right length. We pre-tin the soldering iron with a little bit of solder. Now, blue is the end of this connector, which is TX on the VESC. This needs to go to RX on the Arduino, so this is going to the second pin in from the end. Place it in, melt the solder in. There you go. And then the final one, RX into TX. And we're going to carefully try to melt that in without bridging, which is easier said than done. The flux will help to counter bridging, but you still got to be careful. And there we go. There's 2 more pins done. Now there's 2 more pins to do, the D10 and D11. Those are going to go to the MR30 that will conduct through the multi-core cable to the back of the board. All right, so I just went around and looked at some diagrams and some code to see how I should wire this. It sounds a little more complicated than it actually is, but basically in the back of my board, I have the MR30 that connects to the rear tail light. It has 3 pins that are getting data from the front of the board. One is a signal pin. Great. One is a signal pin, which will be the middle one. One is 5 volt, which we're going to use the isolated pin over here. And then the other one is ground. So I looked at all that to see what order I wanted to solder this in so I don't have to do work twice. So now we're going to solder 3 wires on here. One of them is going to go to the, well, 2 of them are going to go get connected to the cable that goes between the front and the back of the board. And then the 3rd one is going to get connected to the signal pin for the back of the board, which is D11 on the Arduino. Thank you, camera, for that. I'll just bring it into your sight. D11 on here is the rear and D10 is the front. So that is what we'll do. Also, if you're wondering why my fingernails are so long, it's because I play fingerstyle guitar. So there you go. They're long on purpose. Okay, so the wiring for the Arduino is basically done. I'll just explain what we have here again. This is the front connector, yellow for front, out of D10 for the signal. This is the rear connector, blue for back. This one is out of D11 for the signal. Both of these have a positive and negative. These positive and negatives will go to the buck converter, positive and negative out, to get their 5 volts to power the LEDs. Into the Arduino, we're getting 5 volts from the VESC. We're also getting the transmit and receive. Additionally, we're stealing the 3.3 volt from the VESC, and this will go to the buck converter along with these 4 wires. So naturally, next up is to solder the buck converter, and I'm going to see if I've got any Perfboard laying around, because that could be an easy way to do this, but if not, I'm just going to solder it to the pins. Alright, so it turns out I did have some Perfboard laying around, and this stuff is kind of fun. Basically what this is just a PCB with a bunch of blank copper terminals on the back. These are all individual, they're not connected together. And what you can do is you just solder your connector or your components on top. You take their through hole pins, and then you can run traces to other places on the board, as well as, you know, it holds it onto the board. So basically what we're going to do is we're going to bend the pins outwards that we need to solder to, and then we'll just go into the next hole next to them with the wires, and we'll form a little solder bridge. And that is a much more conventional and secure way of soldering the cables and connecting them to this through hole mounted buck converter. So we're going to go ahead and stick a diagram on the screen, and then I'm just going to go ahead and solder it. I don't really feel like talking through every single pin, but I'll talk about it once it's all soldered up. Alrighty, this worked out much better than I even expected, and this is a beautiful way to do this. On the buck converter, we have a positive in, and the enable pin at the top, RC is the enable. So that goes to the white 3.3 volt on the VESC. Then we have positive and negative in, go to this MR30. That will come from the battery. It will tee off of the discharge XT60. And then at the bottom here, we have the V out plus and minus, and we have the two plus and minus, one for the rear, B back, rear, whatever, and then yellow for the front one. So that pretty much covers the entire lighting circuit. And now I think it's time to go ahead and plug this into the computer and load up the Arduino code. And then after that, we can solder some MR30s to the light strips, and we can double check that it all works properly. Alrighty, so we're back with the setup. Some stuff has progressed here, and we're getting ready to cut and fit the LED strips into the enclosure. Now, the reason why I'm trying to fit them first is so I can figure out how long they need to be, then I can plug them in to the Arduino and test them. Like I said, we're going to be loading the code on there soon, but I figured I would cut the LED strips and attach them first so that when we load the code, we can just test it straight up. So, turns out for this valve box, I think this slot is designed to be used with the PCB LEDs. So you just like stick it on the outside. So we kind of have two options here. This kind of fits perfectly on the outside, but the LED strip is not water resistant at all. So I would need to cover the entire thing in epoxy. But at the same time, if I put it inside, I still have to like fill the whole thing with epoxy in the front because there's no front plate. So I might have some plexiglass or something that I could silicone on here, but then it's just going to diffuse the light even more, and it's going to be even less bright. And this is supposed to be the headlight, right? So you want it to be bright. Now, this also doesn't really fit in the slot vertically, so I'm going to try trimming off part of the strip to see if I can get it to fit. But right now I'm trying to figure out how many LEDs long it should be so I can cut it to length, and then I can trim the strip vertically. I think I'm probably going to do one LED short of the full length, otherwise it's going to be really hard to fit it in there. So I went ahead and trimmed off a little bit of the PCB, and it fits. Only just. And it felt kind of wrong, but it did work. So once we test these, we'll know if I affected anything negatively. But the LED diodes themselves are pressed against the upper surface of this filament, which is not really the greatest, but this filament is super high temperature resistant, so we shouldn't have any issues there. The only tiny concern that I have is short. I don't think this filament is conductive enough to actually short, but all of those resistors are technically touching the surface of the filament or the print. So I'll check the conductivity and see if there's any continuity, but it'll probably be fine. I just really don't want the LED strip to melt or catch on fire, especially if I'm going to like epoxy this thing in there. Now that we have the front LED strip measured, cut, and soldered, it's time to do the rear one. This one is a lot more annoying. And I'm thinking, even though I spent a lot of time shoving all these cables in here properly, it might be easiest to do this with the battery out. And that is annoying, but I did not close this on purpose because I knew I was going to put the lights in. So it is what it is. I'll just pop the battery out and reorganize it later. Hopefully it'll stay mostly in place. But the LED strip has like a slot here that it will fit right into, so it's kind of important to get it in the right spot. Alrighty, I've got my aft and forward LED strips soldered onto cables now with their 3 pins and their MR30s. This one is for the back. It's got longer leads because we need to go all the way to the intra-enclosure cable. There is one thing I forgot. I need to add a pull-down resistor on here between 2 of the pins. I need to look it up, but apparently some people experience flickering with the aft lights in the past, and the pull-down resistor helps. So I need to go grab a resistor from my bin, and then we'll solder it across in the appropriate spot. Alrighty, right now what we're doing is soldering the 10K resistor, 10 kilo ohm, between the enable pin and ground. And essentially what this does is when the VESC is on, it's sending 3.3 volts into the enable pin, and without this resistor, when the VESC turns off, the 3.3 volts may still stay enabled, and the buck converter will not turn off the output until it sees a low, which is like less than 1.2 volts. So by soldering this resistor here, when the VESC turns off, it will drain the remaining voltage off the 3.3 rail to ground, thus emptying the stores of energy and making it so that the buck converter turns off properly. Now, this is all just what I'm reading from Mario's guide, and I forgot to do this until now, so here we are. It is essential that you make sure that the enable pin is not shorted to ground, because that would be bad. Since this is a resistor, it's not going to cause any issues. But you don't want the extra to short to ground. So if you don't have a resistor that works, you can go to a local Radio Shack. Oh, is Radio Shack even around still? I don't know, but I have a huge pack of them that I got off AliExpress a long time ago that I pulled out of my stores to use for this. But it shouldn't be too hard to find a resistor. Also, in interest of this not shorting out, we're going to immediately pot it with hot glue. That will keep it insulated from the board and make sure that it doesn't accidentally touch where it's not supposed to. Although, since this is Perfboard, having it touch in a non-soldered spot wouldn't really make a difference, but I feel better with it being potted anyway, and it'll make it more vibration resistant. So we're just going to cover it up. And hopefully it works, otherwise this is going to be really annoying to scrape off. Probably should have tested if it works first, but here we are. You'll notice that nowhere during that did I mention the flickering, and that's because that's actually a different issue. So the flickering apparently occurred for both Mitch, who is the guy that coded this, and Mario when they were first building this. And to solve that, you need to have a resistor for the front and a resistor for the back on the data wires. So we're going to cut these and splice a resistor into each of them with differing values. The front one is supposed to be somewhere between 330 and 500 ohms. So I have both a 330 and a 470 here, but since they gave a range, I'm going to use the 470. Alrighty, we're starting with the blue for back and the 220 ohm resistor. So we're going to just go ahead and snip this right in the middle. that. Stick on a piece of heat shrink. Actually. Enough. Strip off some from front and back. Shorten this up. Apply some flex. And we're just going to apply solder while holding them together. So we get some on the soldering iron. And I'll just hold this. And there you go. I could have made it even shorter actually, now that I look at it. And now we can pull the heat shrink over and shrink it. And there is one of our flickering resistance resistors. And now we gotta do one more time. We've got all 3 resistors installed, the one for the enable pin and the 2 for the data pins. Now we can pair these with the LED strips. So we've got the long one is the back one, which is now yellow. Good job, Ryan. And then the shorter one, or the shorter wires anyway, is the front, which is now blue. There we go. So now we can go ahead and load the software onto the Arduino and test the whole system out. We've got a voltage in here, but I can also just put voltage in. No, right, our ground is covered up. Yeah, I'll use this voltage in and use an MR30 to connect to the power supply and test it out.
Alrighty, so it's time to do the install of the software on the Arduino. This GitHub page is where the code is located. Thank you to Mitch for all the work that he's done on this and other projects for float wheels and VESC wheels. To download this, you just go to code and then download zip. Once you go ahead and download the zip, you can unzip it into a folder. You want to rename this, and inside of here you'll have your .ini file, and this is what's going to open in the Arduino IDE software. You can get Arduino software from online, just Google it. This is some stuff that I had open already. So to open this, double click, and I'll just assign this to OpenINO, which is fine.
Now that you've got your software open and your program open, you can go ahead and plug in your Arduino to your computer. For the Elegoo one, it uses a mini USB cable, not micro. So if you're using that one, make sure you find one of those. So I went ahead and plugged it in. Got the red light on the Arduino. Most Windows PCs should have the right drivers for these already, but you may not. If you don't, there's probably tutorials on the internet to find that pretty easily. We need to select Nano. I'm pretty sure that this is the right one, COM4. And then we're just going to go ahead and hit upload. It'll compile. Looks like it uses about 16 megabytes of storage. 15 maybe. I believe that is uploaded now. Now that's uploaded, the rest of your configuring is going to happen on the board itself. And there's instructions on the GitHub here of how to do that. So this is via footpad presses, so this kind of means that you need to have the board assembled in order to do that. But in our case, since we're still building the board, we can plug it in just plug in the foot pad sensor, plug it into the little Fokker, and just go ahead and tap through this stuff and set it up. All right, so I just got the software installed on the Arduino, so it should be ready to go when the float package is installed onto this VESC. Now I'm trying to do a bench test real quick to see if the light strips are at least wired correctly and working properly. So I have like a sort of janky setup going on here. I've got my bench power supply doing 60 volts into the little Fokker, and then I have an additional output from the bench power supply doing the power in to the buck converter to power the lights. I could do all this on my battery, but I don't really want to do that right now. So we're trying it with the power supply. From what I've read, when I turn this on, it should just light up the LED strips, even if the flow package isn't connected. And then once the flow package is installed on the VESC and all that's configured, it will react appropriately to foot pad presses and stuff like that. So from what I have seen, as long as the lights light up, we're good. I can move on to assembling the rest of the board. So we're gonna go ahead and turn on the power supply. All right, the Arduino is on, the little Fokker turned on. Now we can go ahead and set this to the minimum voltage for the buck converter, which is 43, so this will take a second. All right, I got it to voltage, and it looks like the front LED strip, you can't really see it very well, but the front LED strip is lit up with red lights. I think that means that that's the board battery voltage, but I didn't think that that was supposed to be working yet. We'll go turn off the little Fokker and turn it back on. Oh, there we go. That's full bright. However, and it dimmed into red. The aft strip is not lighting up at all. I'm not sure if that's a wiring issue yet or if that is a drive issue from the float package not being installed. So I guess I'm going to poke around on the board here and see if there's some issue, because this should be getting voltage as far as I'm concerned. I know it's wired correctly, so maybe there's a break somewhere. We'll check it out. All right, so I've done some troubleshooting, and it does appear to be a strip issue. The front strip works in the rear port. There's voltage there. So I don't know what happened here, but either it's not soldered well enough, something broke, I don't know. I have a good bit of this strip, so I'm just going to cut another length and desolder this and put it on the other length, and we'll see what happens. Alrighty, so I resoldered the leads at the end of this. I think I actually soldered them to the wrong end of the strip. I really haven't soldered many of these LED strips before, so I didn't realize that you have to solder at the start side of the arrows, not at the end. Seems obvious now, but in any case, this is what it's supposed to do when you turn it on. Front is white, rear is red, and then it gradually dims into your like steady state of the current battery percent. Now, the software doesn't know how many LEDs are on here, and it also doesn't know what voltage the battery is, so this isn't accurate yet, but once everything's set up, we'll be able to configure that, and it will display correctly. So now that that is confirmed, we can work on getting these lights installed into the enclosures. All right, so we're mounting the lights in the back right now, and it's not really the most stable thing in here. So I think what I'm going to do for now, until I get my epoxy, is I'm just going to put a couple of dabs of black hot glue behind the light strip to sort of hold it in place, and then once we get my epoxy, I will go back and touch it up and put it in more permanently so that it doesn't vibrate around or come loose. So shouldn't be too hard, but it's gonna look a little weird with black hot glue on here, but when you really think about it, this is gonna be sitting inside of here, so you're never gonna see the hot glue anyway. So at the end of the day, who really cares? Probably not me. All right, we got the LED strip glued in. I didn't really see the point in filming it since it took about 30 seconds, but it's gonna sit there and we'll see if that holds up for now, but I got my epoxy on order and it'll be here in a while, so I'll put that in there, hold it in place more effectively, and the hot glue shouldn't be too hard to remove. So that part is done, and this will get plugged straight into the cable here, and when I terminate the other end, it will hook into the buck converter at the front of the board, as well as the Arduino that controls these taillights. All right, between the last clip and this one, I've gone ahead and done a bunch of wiring work. All of my connections are terminated, so now I'm ready to glue the front lights in place. So this is a little bit tough because, like I was talking about earlier, the space that's here is not quite enough, but they fit after I trimmed off the edge. So I'm going to try to glue it as centered as possible. And right now I'm just going to use some hot glue to tack it. And then we will go ahead and use epoxy to hold it in more permanently later. So let me see if there's anything I can shove in here. There's a gap behind the light strip that is a great spot to shove some closed cell foam, temporarily at least, so I can glue it. Or maybe I'll just use a piece of fish paper. Maybe that'll be strong enough. Yeah, that'll work. So I want to peel this corner back over here to glue the end in where the cables are. I'll do that real quick. Hopefully this hot glue doesn't cause any issues for the LEDs later. I don't think it will. But at this end here, it's providing some vibration resistance for the connections as well, which is great. Now I'm going to go ahead and tack this at the other end. I really don't know if this filament is going to cause a problem with these resistors. I can't imagine that it will. But actually, you know what? We can stick a piece of Captain in there. Let's do that. This might be a little difficult, but I can try. Take out this piece of fish paper so I can get in here. Peel this back a little bit. And stick this down there. I think this is super unnecessary, but you know, it doesn't hurt to be a little bit extra safe when it comes to things that have electricity running through them. So now most of that is on the Captain tape. And obviously this needs to get trimmed. So I'm gonna have to cut this off now. All right, we'll put some glue back here to also tack it in. And I think we're going to call that good for the moment until I get the epoxy, and then once I have the epoxy, we can go ahead and pot the whole front of this LED strip, since it's going to be literally environment facing. If it's not water resistant, then the front enclosure is not water resistant, period, and that would be super annoying. So I don't really intend on riding this in damp conditions too much, but if I go through a puddle or something, I don't want water to splash through the light slot. And also the light strip isn't waterproof either, so it would not be good for the lights to be exposed to water like that. The only annoying thing about this is that once I close up this enclosure, this light strip is no longer very accessible, so I have to take the enclosure completely apart to get to it again, and that's kind of a drag, but it is what it is. I could pot the entire back with hot glue, but I don't know if that will melt when the light strip is on for an extended period of time, and that would be pretty annoying if there was hot glue just sort of swimming around in here. So we'll call it good for now and come back to it later. All right, now that all of our wiring is ready, we can go ahead and lay in the light circuit. And I think what I'm going to do is tape the Arduino with double-sided tape to the corner over here. And then we will put the buck converter somewhere out in the open where there's space. There should be plenty of length on the UART cable to reach where it needs to on the ESC. And I won't be able to reach this corner after I put the lid on. I thought about putting the buck converter against the handle here, but it's going to stick up too far and hit the lid. So that's not going to work. So we'll probably attach that to the heatsink with a layer of double-sided tape. But for now, I think that the Nano can go over here in this corner, and then we will stuff all the cables in and put this bottom lid on, and then we will flip it over, take the bottom off, and then we can plug everything into the ESC. All right, so a lot has happened since the last clip in this video, but I went ahead, finished assembling the stuff. I have the epoxy to fill in this front light, and I've attached the foot pad sensor so we can do the configuration of these lights. Now, unfortunately, this can't happen until you install the float package, so you do have to be fully up and running, and you don't necessarily have to have your motor configured yet, I don't think, but you do have to have the float package installed on your little Fokker. I am using the instructions on the GitHub page. So there's the whole configuration section on the footpad UI, and this is what we're going to use to set how many LEDs there are and your voltage and stuff like that. All right, so it's time to seal in the front LED strip, and we've got it right here in this slot. And right now my plan is to backfill the entire rear side of this with hot glue so as to make a dam or a barrier for the epoxy so that it doesn't spill backwards into the enclosure, since while it's drying we're going to have it sitting vertically so that the top surface is nice and flat. You can't see that, but we're going to need to have it sitting vertically so the top surface is nice and flat for it to dry. And it says it's about an hour of cure time. I don't really know if that's accurate or if that's only for like thin amounts or what, but we're going to backfill this with hot glue for now, and we'll see how this goes. Alright, so the whole rear side is now backfilled with hot glue. We have to wait for it to cool down. But I believe this did exactly what I wanted and sealed the entire rear side of the LED strip. So now we should be able to fill in the front with the two-part epoxy and have that dry clear. And then we'll be all good to go with a water-resistant front enclosure. Alright, so we got to mix some epoxy to fill up the light tray per se, and I'm going to be using this JB Weld clear. However, this is not a mixing syringe, which is like a syringe that puts the hardener and the whatever the other one is called together at the same time. they're individual. So I'm going to have to squeeze a whole bunch of this out onto a sheet of probably cardboard, mix it very quickly, and then pour it into this tray. And I need to make sure I mix enough to fill the whole thing, otherwise you could end up with some weird partial lines in there. And all of that needs to happen in 5 minutes. So I'm going to try to do this. I need to find a suitable mixing surface. Probably going to, honestly I could use this actually. Just mix it here, put it like that, and then pour it in, something like that. I'm going to put a dam of Captain tape on the end here, and with the idea of trying to keep any excess from spilling over the edge. I have no idea if this is going to work, but I'll try my best to not miss in the first place. But better to have it there just in case. Alright, so I changed my mind and decided I want to go with this mixing tray and then just try to pour it out of the corner, because I think I just need to mix way too much to do it on that piece of paper. So we're gonna see how this goes. I've never tried to mix this much epoxy before, so I'm probably gonna use like half of the tube. Oh shoot. I didn't expect it to come out that fast for some reason. Alright. One thing I need to be careful of is bubbles. And it seems like I'm already getting bubbles in here by mixing it myself. So I'm probably going to need to use my heat gun and some tapping to get the bubbles out and make sure that it dries clear. So I'll need to go run in the garage and grab that before this hardens. Hopefully this will be enough. I'm not really sure. I call that thoroughly mixed. So let's move the camera up. See if we can do this successfully. All right, here it goes, nothing. Wowee. Looks like I got the amount down pretty good. It's kind of hard to tell how full it is actually in some spots. Oh man, I got all the way to the end and I dripped it on the top. Okay, I think that that's pretty dang good. Let's see if I can wipe this off the top here. I need to grab my heat gun and try to get this stuff off, or get the bubbles out here. That's good enough. You can barely even see it on camera, but it's there. So now, heat gun time. I don't know if me hitting this is going to help it or not, but we'll see. All right, got the heat gun here. And start clearing out some of these bubbles. It's kind of hard to see on camera, but I can definitely tell that this is helping clear some of those bubbles out. And it looks like my hot glue dam behind it worked well, because I don't see any of it draining out. And that looks pretty dang good. See if I can get a little bit of B-roll up close, but those little bubbles in there right now seem fine. Let's go ahead and turn it on and just see what happens. Whoa, that's cool. I can actually see the bubbles much more clearly with the light on, but they're pretty small. And honestly, I don't know if I'm gonna be able to get them out. So I might just have to deal with this. But let's just try a little bit more. Fortunately, this filament is quite heat resistant, so I'm not super worried about that. No, I think that's set. The little bubbles are there to stay, but we got lots of the big ones out, so that's good. And we still have plenty of epoxy left over. And while I didn't fill the trough completely, it looks like it's plenty to at least seal it from the weather. Alrighty, so the lights install is complete. You can't even see this clear epoxy, which is exactly how it's supposed to be. When you turn it on, I will admit, you can see the bubbles a little bit. That's okay. I'm never going to be looking straight into the light anyway, but they will cause a little bit of diffraction, but at the end of the day, it's not bad at all. Front light's installed and done. Rear light is installed and done. And that's it. However, we need to do the configuration, and that will be the next clip, how to configure the light strips, and then we'll do an outro. All right, it's time to finally configure the lights. I figured out my foot pad issues, and it turned out that the switchcraft connector connections were broken. So I fixed all that, and now it's time to configure the lights. So turn the board on, boot up, let it fade to red. We got our instructions here on the left. So one tap on the foot pads brings you into the menu, and then a double tap or both pads hold increments. So first we'll do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 taps. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 taps, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18. That should have set it to 18S. Puts us on yellow battery. That seems about right. Okay, now LED count is 6 taps. 1, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Oh, there's 7 LEDs, right? Duh. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22. Okay, so there's 22 LEDs. This does require a reboot, so I'm going to go ahead and turn it off. And hopefully now, yay! That's exciting. We have fully lit up front. And now we've got a yellow bar. So this is configurable in the idle mode. 4 options: regular colors, battery, green to red, fade in 5 levels, or battery present in green, red, fade, and LEDs on off. So if we go to, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then we go 1, 2, 3. I don't know if I said that right. That's not right. Oh goodness, it's so bright. Okay, I definitely didn't set that right. So 1, 2, 3, 4, hold, that's option 2. Okay. So I need to be on option 1, 2, 3. Okay, so ready, 2, 3, 4, 1. Okay, so that seems about right. The battery right now is at like 61 volts, which is super low. So that is how I want it to show while it's at idle. And now that is all we need to do. So that was pretty easy. Once you find out that your switchcraft connector is broken, configuring the LEDs is easy. So that's awesome. This is pretty much the end for the LED video. So hopefully you guys enjoyed. I'll record an outro right now. Okay, so we finally finished the LED install. Now this was quite interesting. I've never done an LED install like this on a board, so it's pretty cool to see something be this functional. And when I tap here, oh, the board thinks it's going backwards, but when I tap here and oh goodness, there we go. When I tap on the front, it activates the headlight and it'll show you the road while you're riding. So I'm super stoked to have this. And with this LED setup, you do get bi-directional lights. So when you're going in reverse, the headlight will switch to the back and vice versa. Currently at idle, we show our battery percentage in LEDs. Obviously I need to charge the board, but all in all, pretty sweet, and I'm stoked with how it came out and super excited to ride this. So thank you guys so much for watching, and hopefully you found this video useful. Be sure to check out Mario's video and blog post down linked in the description. And stay safe, keep on riding, and peace out.